What would you do if your neighbors decided that your private driveway was actually a public road, and your HOA backed them up? When I bought my house in Pine Grove Estates, I thought I was moving into a peaceful, upscale neighborhood. The real estate agent raved about the tight-knit community, the well-maintained homes, and the safety of living in a place with an active HOA. What she didn't mention was that I'd be stepping into a battle over something that should have been indisputable, my own private property. At first, it seemed harmless. The previous owners had left the place in pristine condition, and I was eager to settle in. I loved my new home, a colonial-style house nestled among towering oak trees, its long driveway winding through the property, giving me the privacy I'd always wanted. But that driveway, as I would soon learn, was the reason my so-called dream home would turn into a battleground. Every morning, a steady stream of cars would cut through my property, bypassing the traffic-jammed main road. It wasn't just a few neighbors, it was dozens. SUVs, minivans, sedans, all treating my driveway like their own personal shortcut. At first, I thought maybe they had special permission from the previous owners. Maybe there was some weird agreement I wasn't aware of. But after searching through my property records, I confirmed the obvious: this was my land. These people were trespassing. The worst offender was Marge Whitman, the self-appointed queen of the HOA. Every morning at exactly 7:45 a.m., she'd glide through in her pristine white SUV, oversized sunglasses perched on her nose, waving to neighbors like she was royalty surveying her kingdom. She didn't even glance at my house. To her, my driveway wasn't private property, it was an established community road, and I was just an inconvenient new arrival who didn't understand how things worked around here. The first time I tried to stop a car, an older man rolled down his window and looked at me like I was the problem. "You should be glad you live on such a convenient access point," he said before hitting the gas and driving through anyway. That was the moment I knew this wasn't just ignorance, this was entitlement. I spent weeks researching my options, consulting with a lawyer, and gathering security footage. 50 cars a day. That's how many I counted. Some even sped through like they were on a highway. The HOA had done nothing to stop it, and I soon realized why: they were in on it. So, I did what any rational homeowner would do. I hired a contractor and scheduled the installation of a set of heavy-duty security gates. And I made sure the installation happened on a Saturday morning, when everyone would see it. I was ready for the backlash. But what I wasn't ready for was how far Marge and the HOA were willing to go to stop me. The first real confrontation happened before the gates were even finished. The contractors had barely unloaded their equipment when I heard the unmistakable sound of Marge Whitman's SUV screeching to a halt at the end of my driveway. The driver's side door flung open, and there she was, storming across my lawn in designer heels, her phone clutched in one manicured hand like a weapon. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" she demanded, her voice sharp enough to cut through the crisp morning air. I stood my ground. "Installing security gates. This is private property, Marge." Her face contorted into an expression of theatrical outrage, as if I'd just announced I was bulldozing the entire neighborhood. "You can't do that. This driveway has been a community access point for years. You can't just—" "Actually, I can," I interrupted, pulling out the property survey I had printed just for this moment. "This is private land, and I have the legal right to secure it. The HOA has no authority over my driveway." Her expression twisted with fury. She turned on her heel, already dialing a number. "We'll see about that." That was the beginning of the real war. By the following Monday, I received my first HOA violation notice in the mail. A $250 fine for obstructing a community road. I read it twice, barely able to believe the audacity. The HOA, under Marge's leadership, had reclassified my driveway as a public access route. I checked my security cameras, and sure enough, Marge and Sue Grayson, one of her HOA board allies, had been outside my property with a clipboard, marking down notes. I wasn't about to let them rewrite reality. I called my lawyer, who assured me the fine was baseless and advised me not to pay. That didn't stop the HOA. The next day, I got another fine. Then another. They began stacking up, $250 per day, totaling over $3,000 within 2 weeks. And it didn't stop there. One morning, I opened my mailbox to find a notice from the county zoning office. According to their records, my driveway was now marked as a secondary neighborhood road. My stomach dropped. Marge had done more than just complain, she had submitted altered neighborhood maps to the county. I drove straight to the zoning office and demanded to see the documents. The clerk pulled up the records, and sure enough, there was a newly filed Community Roadway Update stamped with the HOA's logo. It showed my private driveway as a designated access road. "This is fake," I said, shoving the papers back across the counter. The clerk gave me a sympathetic look. "If you can prove it's incorrect, you'll need to file a legal dispute. But the HOA has already submitted community testimonies supporting the change." I clenched my jaw. Marge had recruited her army of sycophants to sign off on this lie. By the time I got home, I was ready to explode. I checked my security cameras and found exactly what I expected. The footage from a week earlier showed Marge, Sue Grayson, and a few other HOA members walking around my property with clipboards, pretending to conduct a survey. They had been setting this up for weeks. That night, I called my lawyer again. "They're trying to rewrite legal documents. We're taking this to court." The HOA had made their move. Now, it was my turn. The legal battle over my driveway was still brewing when Marge decided to escalate things in a way I never saw coming. It was a foggy Tuesday morning when I was jolted awake by the deep rumble of heavy machinery outside. My security system had already flagged multiple vehicles arriving at my property. I threw on a jacket, rushed outside, and felt my stomach drop. A construction crew had set up at the entrance of my driveway. Bright orange cones lined the street, and a group of workers in hard hats were huddled around blueprints, marking the ground with spray paint. A large backhoe sat idling nearby. It looked like they were about to start digging. And there, standing in the middle of it all like a general leading an army, was Marge Whitman. I stormed up to the workers. "What the hell is going on here?" A man in a reflective vest turned to me. "Morning, sir. We're with City Works Construction. We're here to conduct an emergency water main inspection." "There's no water main under my driveway," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "Actually, there is," Marge chirped, stepping forward and pulling out a stack of documents like they were gospel. "According to these recently discovered utility maps, there's a critical water line beneath your driveway, and your gates are a serious public safety hazard. We're simply ensuring the integrity of the community's infrastructure." I stared at her in disbelief. She was so smug, standing there with that plastic smile, acting like she wasn't blatantly making this up. I snatched one of the documents from her hand. It was a map from 30 years ago. A plan for a proposed water line that was never even installed. My blood boiled. "You're using outdated, fake records to justify digging up my driveway?" Marge's smile never wavered. "We can't take any chances with community safety." The construction crew hesitated, sensing something wasn't right. Just then, a familiar voice cut through the tension. Rachel Carter, my engineer neighbor, had arrived. She pushed her way through the crowd, grabbed one of the maps, and laughed out loud. "This is a joke, right?" she said, flipping the page. These plans were part of a rejected development proposal from the 1990s. The city never approved them. The construction supervisor frowned. "Wait, what?" Rachel handed him the document. "There's no record of this line ever being installed. If you dig here, you're excavating private property without a permit." The man's face paled. He turned to his crew and muttered, "Pack it up." Marge's expression cracked for the first time. No, no. You can't just leave. We have authorization. But the foreman had already pulled out his phone. I'm calling city utilities to verify this. If you lied to us, lady, that's on you. I crossed my arms and watched Marge implode in real time. Her lips were pressed into a thin line, her fingers twitching at her sides. She had lost this round. The construction crew left within the hour, but Marge wasn't done. Not even close. The next morning, I woke up to find my gates had been vandalized. Bright red spray paint scrawled across the metal, spelling out, "Community Access." I checked my security cameras, already knowing who I'd find. Sure enough, at 2:37 a.m., Steve Whitman, Marge's husband, was caught on camera, sneaking onto my property with a can of spray paint. But before I could even report it, I got another HOA violation notice. This time, a fine for defacing neighborhood aesthetics. Marge had the audacity to fine me for the vandalism her own husband committed. It was official. This wasn't just a neighborhood dispute anymore. This was war. The spray paint was still drying on my gates when the next attack landed. That same afternoon, a notice arrived from the HOA. This time, it wasn't another bogus fine. It was an invitation to a special community meeting, a meeting about me. I read the letter twice. The wording was deliberately vague, but the message was clear. Marge was trying to turn the neighborhood against me. I wasn't about to walk into an ambush without a plan. That night, I called my lawyer and a few trusted neighbors, including Rachel Carter and Diane Porter. If Marge wanted to play dirty, we'd be ready. By the time Monday evening rolled around, I knew something big was coming. I arrived at the community center 15 minutes early, but I wasn't early enough. The place was already packed. Marge had clearly stacked the room, her supporters filled the front rows, whispering and nodding as she stood near the HOA board members, looking like a queen addressing her court. Richard Benson, the HOA president, looked exhausted. He had clearly been strong-armed into this. At exactly 7 p.m., Benson cleared his throat and called the meeting to order. We're here tonight to discuss ongoing concerns regarding access patterns in the neighborhood, specifically the... Marge cut him off. We're here to address a serious disruption to our community. She turned to the crowd, her voice thick with manufactured outrage. For decades, our neighborhood has thrived because of mutual respect and cooperation. But that harmony has been shattered by one homeowner's selfish decision to block a critical access point. Her supporters murmured in agreement. I watched the performance unfold, arms crossed. Marge continued. We, the concerned residents of Pine Grove Estates, have gathered signatures from 78% of homeowners who oppose these gates and demand their immediate removal. She held up a thick stack of papers and slammed them onto the table for dramatic effect. A few people clapped. Then she smiled. Additionally, due to the ongoing hostility and disruption caused by this homeowner, the board will now hear a motion for a community vote to determine whether he should be required to vacate his home for the good of Pine Grove Estates. I felt the room shift. People weren't expecting that. Benson blinked. Marge, we... She turned on him, her voice sharp. This community has rights. We can't let one outsider destroy everything we've built. I stood up. That's enough. All eyes turned to me. You want a vote? I said, my voice calm. Fine. But first, let's talk about these signatures. I reached into my bag and pulled out printed copies of security footage. Footage of Marge, Sue Grayson, and Steve Whitman going door to door, pressuring neighbors into signing. In one clip, a homeowner could be heard asking, "Wait, what am I signing again?" before Sue shoved the paper in his face. I tossed the copies onto the table. This wasn't a fair petition. It was manipulation. Marge's smile wavered. That's. And let's talk about the so-called disruption I'm causing, I continued. Because last I checked, I'm not the one who called a fake construction crew, spray-painted someone's property, or filed fraudulent zoning requests. Marge's face turned red. I turned to Benson. This isn't about community access. This is about Marge trying to control everyone. Rachel Carter stood up. He's right. And for the record, my security cameras caught HOA members inspecting my property, too. She pulled out her phone, showing a video of Steve Whitman measuring her front yard. Guess what? The next day, I got a violation notice about my non-compliant landscaping. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some people were realizing they weren't safe from Marge's games either. Benson rubbed his temples. Marge, I think we need to. Marge wasn't having it. She grabbed the petition and shoved it toward the board. We have the votes. This is happening whether you like it or not. I smiled. Actually, it's not. From my bag, I pulled out a letter from my lawyer. Since you've decided to turn this into a legal matter, I said, let's make it official. This is a formal complaint against the HOA for harassment, fraudulent conduct, and property interference. I've already filed it with the County Housing Authority. The room went dead silent. Marge's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Richard Benson exhaled loudly and turned to his board members. We're done here. He grabbed the petition and tossed it into the trash. The meeting was over. Marge had lost. But something told me she wasn't going down without a fight. The fallout from the HOA showdown was swift and brutal, for Marge, not me. The moment my lawyer's complaint hit the County Housing Authority, an official investigation into HOA misconduct was launched. Within a week, auditors arrived at the HOA office, requesting financial records, zoning documents, and all board communications regarding the so-called community access dispute. Marge tried to play innocent, pretending it was just a misunderstanding, but that act crumbled fast when investigators found altered property maps, falsified zoning requests, and evidence of harassment complaints against multiple homeowners. It got even worse for her when Richard Benson, the HOA president, abruptly resigned. In a written statement to the board, he cited ethical concerns, and threw Marge directly under the bus, claiming he had been pressured into backing her personal vendetta. Seeing the writing on the wall, other board members followed suit. Within a month, Pine Grove Estates no longer had an HOA. The state dissolved it due to fraud, leaving the neighborhood to operate without a ruling body for the first time in decades. And Marge? Well, she lasted 2 more weeks before putting her house up for sale. Not because she wanted to, because she had no choice. The news media had picked up the story, painting her as a power-hungry HOA tyrant. Videos of her losing her temper at the community meeting went viral, and potential buyers weren't eager to move into a house with a notorious former HOA president. After months of sitting on the market with no offers, she and Steve slashed the price and left town. With Marge gone, the neighborhood changed overnight. The petty violation notices stopped, social events resumed without fear of HOA interference, and people actually started talking to each other again, not just gossiping about who was next on Marge's hit list. Rachel Carter was elected to an informal homeowner committee, ensuring that if any issues arose in the future, they would be handled fairly and with community input. Diane Porter's mailbox color was never mentioned again. And me? The gates stayed up. The driveway that once caused so much controversy now stood as a symbol of standing up against HOA abuse. New neighbors moved into Marge's old house, and on their first day, they actually knocked on my door and introduced themselves. When they asked about the gate situation, I gave them the short version. They just laughed and said, honestly, it's good to have clear boundaries. Makes for better neighbors. So, what do you think? Was I right to stand my ground, or should I have handled things differently? Have you ever felt powerless against HOA or Karen rules? Share your experiences below. Let's see who had it worse.